Welcome back to the NextArc spectrum of leadership styles. We've journeyed across both the active and dominant styles. Today, we'll explore the far right of our spectrum, and I'll show a visual here in a moment. Starting with the last of our viable leadership styles, we call them the passive positive, or the peacekeeper is the nickname. And then the non-viable passive neutral negative, the abdicator. Yes, it is a style, but it really is not, and we see it. We see it more in crisis times and situations like financial crises and the like. Saw a lot of it during COVID, but it really is not a viable leadership style. The passive neutral negative anchors the right side of the spectrum. Its nickname is the abdicator, and for that reason, you can see why they're really not a viable leadership style if they're abdicating. So before I get into much detail, let me share my screen. Bear with me just a second to show our visual, and we'll be anchored. You'll be able to see that now. We're anchoring the right side of the leadership spectrum. So now we've reached the passive positive, the second from the extreme right, the peacekeeper. Their core driving need is camaraderie and affection. Their demeanor is very people-oriented and sociable. Their language is encouraging, empathetic, but often displays considerable discomfort with business performance metrics, anything that can be quantified that in their minds makes people look like widgets in a machine as opposed to human beings. So their office environment is often warm and inviting, perhaps with comfortable sofas and chairs, quiet music, and even a fridge with beverages. It's not unusual, designed to make others feel really at ease in their home environment. Their time horizon is very long-term, focused on really sustained relationships. And when under pressure, their backup style is active negative, highlighting a shift towards focusing on rules or procedures to avoid interpersonal conflict, particularly. That's how they use the rules game, is really to avoid any interpersonal conflict, confrontation. So how would one work most effectively with this style, the peacekeeper? So you should stress how your proposal will bring stakeholders together. Togetherness is really what they're after. Talk about employee engagement and greater engagement as a result of your proposal, and focus on the greater good. They are well liked, these people, but rarely make concrete plans. They often miss their numbers and instead prioritize harmony and avoiding conflict, which can really lead to withdrawal from difficult conversations, particularly those involving organizational results, as I said, and financial performance. So who might exemplify the peacekeeper? In the world of politics, Jimmy Carter comes to mind. Many of you know he was deeply committed to human rights and peace building. Some say he was a more effective post-president person than during his presidency, but really focused on peace building on the global stage, often prioritizing diplomatic resolutions and humanitarian aid. While his moral compass was strong, his focus on maintaining harmony and his reluctance to engage in confrontational politics sometimes came at the expense of political expediency or swift, decisive action. He was admired for his integrity and compassion, which are hallmarks of the peacekeeper. And then the last style, anchoring the right side of the spectrum, is the passive neutral negative. Again, I described briefly earlier, nicknamed the abdicator. So anchoring that side, we have that abdication perspective, passive neutral negative. This isn't really a leadership style at all, right? As I mentioned, their core driving need is avoidance, and their demeanor is unpredictable, sometimes cold, sometimes hostile. They might think themselves a victim, complain, and be uncharacteristically, relative to their previous known demeanor, introverted or apathetic. You often see someone glitch into this style, which I'll talk to in a moment. Their language is, again, avoidant, and they shrink from direct confrontation or responsibility. Their office environment might be messy and neglected. And that is, if you can get into it, because the door is probably always closed, an indicator of their withdrawal. Their time horizon is focused on short-term survival and self-preservation. When under pressure, their backup style is passive positive, indicating a shift towards trying to maintain superficial harmony, but it is superficial. So how would you work most effectively with this style, the abdicator? You should draw out the root cause, mentor them, suggest coaching or counseling, and avoid giving them too much direct responsibility or asking them to initiate. What they take on is likely to fail. Their behavior is highly unpredictable, as I said, sometimes aggressive, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes flexible, often not. While they typically avoid conflict, their anger can occasionally erupt unexpectedly, causing significant disruption. It can be embarrassing sometimes. I've seen this many times, again, during the financial crisis of 2008-9. More recently, during the COVID crisis, there was an emergence in both those kind of spikes of unusual business cycles. They're predictably unpredictable, as I said. Of all the styles, these pose the greatest potential risk to an organization. So how do leaders of this type make it into leadership? Well, typically they don't. We see this style, as I said, emerge, often suddenly and often due to some very difficult professional or personal experience. So on the professional side, a merger that creates, for example, 2 chief marketing officers where there had been only one, and only one will be needed going forward. That can cause one of the two to kind of glitch into this style. Or on the personal side, think of a divorce or an illness or a child battling addiction. Most of these leaders are only shadows of their former selves and have glitched into this style because they don't really know what else to do. So who might be an example of this style or non-style? Think of a leader who becomes completely disengaged during a crisis, allowing their organization to drift. This could be a CEO who is publicly missing in action during a major scandal, failing to provide direction or take responsibility, leaving a void where leadership is desperately needed. Historically, on the political spectrum, think of Richard Nixon, at least in the final days of Watergate. He would come to mind. As the scandal engulfed his presidency, he became increasingly isolated and erratic, classic signs of the passive neutral negative style, exhibiting unpredictable behavior and a profound disengagement from the responsibilities of his office, ultimately leading to his resignation. So the abdicator highlights the critical importance of being actively engaged in leadership and seeking help from a coach or a mentor or a counselor when needed on this situation. And so that brings us next time to our final installment. We'll wrap up this series with some key takeaways and discuss how understanding these styles can be put to use to elevate your leadership to an elite level. So don't miss it, and I look forward to talking with you next time. Thank you.